What is something that was acceptable 100 years ago which is unacceptable today? Remember, we're talking about 1922 here, no 1850. Had to think for a minute. When I hear 100 years ago, my brain still thinks 1890s. 2000 was 4 years ago, damn it. Putting lead in everything. Putting radium in everything. They actually drank radium water in the 20s and used radioactive paint for watches. https://n.wikipedia.org Wikiradium girls. Heck, in the 1950s, one kid's science kits came with straight-up uranium. You can still order uranium samples online. I wouldn't sleep with one under my pillow, but a small piece of uranium or isn't enriched enough to be much of a threat, roughly about the same as UV exposure from the sun, especially if it's kept in the container. I'm sure it's a ton less exposure than just flying one time in a commercial airline. Edit, so the consensus is yes. A cross-country flight will expose you to 0.035 MSV, roughly 350 bananas of radiation. Uranium varies a lot depending on what kind and such, but let's say you had about a 5-pound chunk of uranium or under your pillow. That'd probably be maybe 0.03 MSV. That's better than I thought, give or take a couple of zeros. Your real risk is accidentally eating the uranium in your sleep. If it's a really small piece, maybe 50 milligrams or so, it'll probably kill you, so definitely go for a nice safe big piece of uranium. Till bananas can be used as a unit of radiation. As far as naturally occurring, common things go, bananas are highly radioactive. Granite is also radioactive. Smoking and drinking while pregnant. My mom did it and I was born in '97. Doing heroin to cure a cough or a cut. But officer, I have a paper cut, it's medicinal. Sir, that is crack. Yeah, you could consider it a crack in my skin. Slapping kids at school. Not graduating high school. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes and the unexpected and wholesome comments about your grandparents and great-grandparents. I really enjoyed reading them after a long day at work. Definitely was much more normal for good people to drop out of high school 100 years ago, to help out on the farm or family small business. Not dropping out. Us high school attendance in the 1920s was like 30%. You were in school until you turned 12, then you got a job. Unless you were one of the betters. Putting belladonna in your eyes, to get a doe eye effect. Radioactive wallpaper. Belladonna atropine is still used by ophthalmologists to dilate pupils. But your point stands, it's no longer used for cosmetic reasons. And it's ducking maddening. Let me try and read, fuck. Left the optometrist to get contact solution on my way home. Must have looked like a crazy person alternating between squinting and widening my eyes and moving the box near and far trying to read that shit. Oh even with rice. Watching my kid playing a video game as his eyes dilated in the waiting room at the ophthalmologist office was so funny. Mommy, the screen is blurry and he looks up at me with one kinda normal pupil and one that was quite dilated. I cracked up. He did that where he kept moving the screen to try to see it better, then gave up after a bit. Thinking the Milky Way was the entirety of the universe. Hubble didn't verify the existence of other galaxies outside the Milky Way until 1924, Andromeda being the first. For a second there, I forgot Hubble was a dude. Wait. The Hubble hasn't been up that long? Haha, yeah, got me too. I was like, we didn't have rockets back then, what the hell? Beating your wife and kids. He wouldn't have beat you if you just listened to him. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Third time this quote has appeared in this thread. There was just a lot more beatings 100 years ago in all regards lol. Asbestos. It was deemed a miracle fiber in its day. The stuff was used everywhere. They even had asbestos cigarettes. Cancer too. Pushing small children up a chimney or down mines. Those definitely were not growth industries. It could have been if those damn kids didn't keep dying. Naming your kid Adolf. My neighbor's name is Adolf. Born in Switzerland in 1943. I guess someone panicked. Taking your gun to school. That was actually 50 years ago. My father talks about taking his rifle to school, putting it in his locker, and taking it out after school for gun club where they shot targets out behind the football field with a teacher. I graduated in 1987 and there were a lot of guns in vehicles in the school parking lot. During deer season a lot of people would go sit in their stands before school. Putting cocaine in soft drinks. A couple of lads disagree. Would those lads happen to be mad? Stopping by a friend, family member, neighbor's house unannounced without asking ahead of time if they feel like having company. Please tell my dad this information. One day my mom stopped by, for the 4th time that week, and my husband and I were arguing and I was in the worst mood. I was snippy and rude. I got the courage up the next day to apologize and asked her to please call or text before coming by, because it's not always a good time and I'd like the opportunity to tell her that instead of being shitty to her. It worked without hurting her feelings. Lasted about 6 months lol. So she'll just knock on your door? And you're like, who's that? And it's your mom just standing there? Traveling by horse on the highway. Institutionalization of women, usually by her parents or husband, for pretty much any reason they thought up because she was difficult, labeling her hysterical. My grandmother died in an institution for this very reason. My grandfather convinced a doctor that she was hysterical. I imagine she was after he beat her and raped his and her daughter. Racial segregation of 100 types, including property covenants that prohibited the sale of a home to a non-white family. I live in a house where that was in the original deed restriction. The previous owner was a professor who kept all the old documents for historical purposes. My husband is a dark-skinned Latino, and I'm a woman, so neither of us would have been allowed to buy this house when it was built. Women weren't given credit in those days. It's one of those things that you know intellectually, but when you hold the documents in your hands, with your address on them, it's different. Our house's deed is like that too. We are both Hispanic. It was a little bit of a shock to read that only white people were allowed to live there. Buying dynamite and ammonia nitrate at the local hardware store. I got to hear some interesting stories of how my great-uncles cleared tree stumps to make way for crop fields. My uncle used to blow up stumps when I was a kid. About 1990. Had to run for it after he lit the fuse. Not sure where he bought the stuff. He was a farmer. Smoking literally everywhere. Mother duckers probably tried smoking while swimming. There was a snorkel with a cigarette holder built in so you could smoke while swimming. If I find it I will share a link. Edit, it's somewhere in this Sam O'Nella video. m.youtube.com watch? From Brooksny. Lynching. It was popular enough that you could get lynching postcards, complete with a graphic photo of the murder, going into the 1920s. This is despite the U.S. Postal Service banning them in 1908. Sending 7-year-old kids to the store by themselves or let them roam freely after dark. I spent some time abroad and was always shocked to see 4-year-old kids pushing their 2-year-old siblings around the grocery store all by themselves. Depends where you are, I guess. Not that it's unacceptable now, but back in the 20s they would call alcoholic beverages giggle water, which I think is super cute. Edit, I didn't know alcohol was illegal back then in the US. Should have added that it's a US thing. BC, I don't think the Dutch ever called alcohol giggle water. Thanks for the added history lesson lol. Joke's on you, we are in the 20s. Turns out they happen every 100 years. Smoking in pubs. Licking radium to make wrist watches. New movies without sound or color. Tying your giraffe to a lamp post or telephone pole. Atlanta, edit, wore the wrong tie. Some of those crazy laws are clearly only on the books because someone did it one time and they couldn't charge him with a crime. Rule 536.p3.s27. One may not entice owls and stray cats into combat during business hours for the sole purposes of self-fornication by reciting the owl and the pussycat in a high falsetto and wearing nothing but a trench coat. Kevin. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government. T. Jefferson.